Hey guys, I made a crochet checker bag. I used cotton yarn and a G crochet hook. It was difficult to see the stitches with black yarn, so I made a mini example using these colors. Place the yarn over the hook with the end facing forward. Bring the end of the yarn to the back, wrapping around the longer end. Then bring the longer end over to the front of the hook and pull it through the loop created. This is a slip knot. Bring the longer end over to the front again and pull it through the loop created. This is the first chain stitch. I made 64 chain stitches for the bag. The amount of chain stitches should be a multiple of 4. This example had 20 chain stitches. Add 2 chain stitches to start the row. In the 4th stitch from the end, make a double crochet stitch. To do this, yarn over, go through the chain stitch, yarn over again and pull it through the loop. Yarn over, pull it through 2 loops, yarn over again and pull it through both loops. I counted this as making my 2nd stitch. Yarn over, go through the next stitch and continue making double crochets. For the 4th stitch, yarn over, go through the chain stitch, yarn over again and pull it through the loop. Yarn over and pull it through 2 loops. Then switch to the other color. Yarn over and pull it through both loops to complete the double crochet. Pretend that these strands are part of this row and make 4 double crochets. Before finishing the 4th double crochet, tug the other strands so that the color doesn't show in the back. Switch back to the previous color. Yarn over and pull it through both loops to complete the double crochet. Repeat this with the rest of the row. When there's just a little piece of yarn left, ignore it and cut it off later. At the end of the row, don't switch the yarn. Make another row of the same colors to form squares. Make 1 chain stitch to start the next row and turn it over. Pretend that this yarn is part of the row and continue the pattern. Go through both of these loops when making your double crochets. Switch the color before finishing the last double crochet of the row. Make 1 chain stitch to start the next row. Pretend that this yarn is part of the row and continue the pattern. Two rows form a square. When you reach the end of your last row, make a chain stitch and pull the end of the yarn through the loop. Starting at the opposite end, I made a row of single crochets. To do this, go through the chain stitch, yarn over and pull it through the loop. Yarn over again and pull it through both loops. Repeat this with the rest of the row. Make one chain stitch and pull the end of the yarn through the loop. Then I turn the piece upside down. And made a row of single crochets. Make one chain stitch and pull the end of the yarn through the loop. With a tapestry needle, I weave the ends a few times and cut the extra yarn. Fold it with the inside facing out. I counted 2 double crochets from the sides and sewed it. I sewed the corners and made sure that the squares lined up. I sewed here to keep the seam allowance down. I also sewed the middle. Then I turned it inside out. I used black cotton fabric for the lining. These were my measurements for the side of the bag, the base, and the other side. I used Heat and Bond Ultra Hold to add structure to the base. I cut a strip, ironed it onto fabric, and sewed another piece of fabric to the back. I cut around the corners and trimmed the sides. Then peeled the paper off, turned it inside out, and ironed it. I ironed another piece of the base, peeled the paper off, added the fabric, and sewed around the edge, as well as these parts. Like the outer piece, I sewed the sides. I also sewed a zigzag stitch along the edge so that the fabric wouldn't fray. Then sewed the bottom part. I folded the top twice and sewed it. Then placed it in the outer piece, aligned it, and sewed here. For the back of the zipper, I crocheted 2 strips that had 3 rows of 48 single crochets. For the front of the zipper, I made 4 rows of 56 single crochets, followed by 2 rows of 6 single crochets. At the other end, I made 2 rows of 6 single crochets, followed by 50 chain stitches and 6 single crochets to complete the row. Then continue to make rows to match the bottom section. I weaved the ends a few times and cut the extra yarn. Then align the back pieces with this side. The ends will align with these stitches. I hand sewed it in place. Then used a sewing machine. I sewed the zipper closed, placed it between the two layers, and sewed. On the 5th stitch from the end, I connected it to the edge using a slip stitch. I did the same to the other side. Weave the ends a few times and cut the extra yarn. For the straps, I made a slip knot, followed by 4 chain stitches, and added 1 chain stitch to start the row. I skipped the chain that I made, went to the second back loop, and made a single crochet stitch. Go through the stitch, yarn over, pull it through the loop, yarn over again, and pull it through both loops. I did this for the rest of the row. Then made 1 chain stitch to start the next row and made a single crochet. Go through these 2 loops, yarn over and pull it through both loops. Yarn over again and pull it through 2 loops. I did this for the rest of the row. Then made a chain stitch to start the next row, and repeated the steps. Go through 2 loops, yarn over, pull it through both loops, yarn over again, and pull it through 2 loops. With the end of the yarn on the same side as the start, I had 63 rows. I made a chain stitch to start the 64th row, then made a single crochet. Go through 3 loops, yarn over, pull it through 3 loops, yarn over, and pull it through 2 loops. I did this for the rest of the row. I made a chain stitch at the end, weave the ends a few times, and cut the extra yarn. I sewed them onto the bag. Here's how I looked inside. And here's how it turned out.